You'll notice the Geissele pins have a small spherical dimple on the ends. It's just to identify our pins and make it a little bit easier for a punch to center up on it. There are some aftermarket pins out there, non-rotating pins. We don't recommend using them. They're not the right size and they're soft. The Geissele pins are 4140 chrome moly steel. They've been turned, heat treated, and then centerless ground within a couple tenths tolerance on the diameter with a 16 finish. They're very strong, very good pin. Since they're hardened, they don't embed dirt into the pin surface, which can wear your receiver walls. Now your trigger's installed. Just try it, make sure it's free. Make sure your disconnector goes up and down under spring tension. And now it's time for the hammer installation. You're going to need to pop this pin out. You can use your finger to pop it out, or sometimes you might need to push it against a bench or something in order to pop it out. If it's very difficult to come out and some of our pins have significant tension from the J-hook, just take a hammer and smack it, and you'll smack that pin right past the J-hook. Here's your hammer spring. Notice the way it's installed. The bow is toward the back or near the tail of the hammer. It can be flipped around. In case you take it off, you can have it in backwards. You'll have light primer strikes if this isn't installed correctly. You'll also notice on our hammer spring that the legs and the bow are pretty much parallel to each other. We use a full strength hammer spring. With our light hammer, this allows the Geissele SSA to set off any type of ammunition, any type of hard primered military ammunition, Russian 545, 308 762 ammo, even the hard primered steel cased Russian 762 ammo. Anything it'll set off. You won't have any problems with light primer strikes. We do that for a couple reasons. Make a strong hammer spring. One is, of course, for reliability reasons. But the other reason goes back to a test that the Army Marksmanship Unit did with aftermarket triggers that did not have full power hammer springs. They took an upper receiver, very accurate upper receiver, clamped it in a machine rest that they have there, and they did accuracy testing on it, just replacing the lower with the trigger in it. A good trigger with a good strong hammer spring, they get nice tight groups of 300 yards. You put a receiver with a trigger with a compromised hammer spring, one where the legs may be at an angle to each other, and the groups open right up. Groups are centered up, but big and round. So testing has shown that you get a much more accurate weapon with a good solid strike on the primer, which aids in consistent ignition. Now, in order to install this, it's going to be under spring tension. And you just have to be careful when you do this and take your time and be able to manipulate your hammer around in order to line the holes up. Don't rush. Don't try to shove it in there and for a split second get the holes aligned and then try to jam the pin in. Just take your time and understand how this fits in there. First thing that you do is these hammer spring legs go on top of the trigger pin. They don't go underneath it. You go underneath it, you're going to get light primer strikes. You're not going to get the full force of the hammer pin, and your trigger pin will walk when firing because these legs won't capture it. So all you do is just lay it on top. Lay it on top of the trigger pin. This is how I hold it when I put it in. Two fingers, one down here, one on top of the tail. Take your time. Practice lining up your hammer with the hole. You'll see the trigger moving back as it pushes it down. Make sure your safety's in the fire position when you're doing this. Take your hammer pin, line it up, push it right in. You might have to wiggle the hammer a little bit. Notice it's not installed fully. You want to tap this guy in just a little bit. The hammer is cocked now in the receiver. You will not be able to drive this pin home. You have to line up the other side here with your pin. And the way you do that is you just grab your hammer, look down the hole, align your pin up. Just move it around and twist it. You might have to twist it a little bit. Line your pin up with the hole and just push it through. You might need a little tap here. I'm not sure if you can see this, but you can see the hammer spring legs in here. They're sitting on top of the trigger. Everything is installed. That's all you need to do. Cock your hammer, control it. Don't let it slam forward onto the receiver. You can break the receiver after many strikes there and crack it. This is your first stage. You'll notice slack. It's basically slack in the trigger. This is a two-stage trigger. Military type combat trigger. The SSA is not a match trigger. It's a combat trigger. It breaks like a carrot. It's approximately 1.75 pounds to 2 pound break. First stage is about 2.5 to 3.5 pounds. So you'll have anywhere from a 4.5 to 5.5 pound trigger. It breaks like a carrot, not like an icicle. It's designed this way because fine motor skills degrade in a stressful situation. And this trigger is designed for situations where the shooter is going to be under stress. If it was a very light trigger, very light break on the second stage, the shooter would not be able to control this trigger in a stressful situation. Here's your first stage. This first stage in a two-stage trigger provides safety, reliability, and forgiveness in a combat trigger. After your first stage, comes to a wall. You see it stop. Additional pressure on the trigger, and the hammer falls. This is how you use a two-stage trigger. For a close-in shot, you don't even pay attention to second stage. You just pull it. You go right through it. You have a shot where you're going to, it's more of a precise shot. You line your sights on target, pull through your first stage. At the instant you want the shot to break, a little bit more pressure, and it goes. Check your safety, turn it on, pull the trigger hard, hammer shouldn't fall. Now let's lubricate this properly. We take some lubricating oil, anything, you can use anything, CLP. 1 drop on top of the disconnector, right where the pin goes through.